we go. Thank you for the prompt. So yeah, a big kind of concept that we wanted to introduce is that ideas are actually kind of like research. So most of you will be in academic settings at the moment, and what happens is you have a hypothesis, which you then go out and test. So something you believe to be true, but don't yet know to be true. And then you run a set of research, experiments, tests incrementally to see how it evolves. And Will and I were talking about this earlier this morning. Will, I don't know if you wanted to kind of share how that looked for you with manhole metrics. And actually, first of all, kind of give a explainer of like the problem area that you were looking to solve.
Sure, by all means. Yeah. So I guess my backstory to the business and whatnot is that during the third year of my studies, also at Imperial, I had a sewage flood in my basement, and it was because of a little chunk of fat bug that we later found. It was pretty unpleasant, and yeah, I we then discovered these giant fat bugs, delved into that whole world. Some of these like are longer than Tower Bridge and can like weigh as much as like 10 double-decker buses. So it was crazy. So the idea was around, well, what if we could have a sensor that would detect these fat bugs and it would have all these really cool features and whatnot. And that was kind of the idea. And then started speaking to people in the industry, and they're saying, well, fat bugs, they're just a part of this flooding problem that we're having, not just in London, but in the rest of the UK and globally. So it's like, okay, flooding really is the issue, and it's about low cost sensors that last a long time. And then it wasn't just on the sewage network, it's anywhere with long drainage systems, so road, rail. And each time that we spoke to someone in the sector or who had experience building this kind of tech, we learned something new. We refined, we iterated, and then it was, oh, do you know what? You need a software platform to go with this. So each time we spoke to someone, we found out something new. So we got outside of our comfort zone, we spoke to different people, and we were able to refine and pivot our initial idea from something that was kind of very specific to a problem we had, and was quite niche, to then something that had a lot larger target market and was actually something that people out there wanted, not just what we thought they wanted. So yeah.
So I think that story from Will is so important, because one of the things we see a lot, and I've definitely been guilty of, is obsessing about the sense that like our brilliant ideas are brilliant and they will remain brilliant. But actually, most ideas, most good ideas start as this kind of like half-formed, scrappy thing, and they do not kind of begin as this complete entity. And equally, the prompt of like not jumping into your first idea. And I think underlying that, it's this sense of like, leave your assumptions on the shelf, because you don't yet know. And where you'll best learn is out in the community with your end users and beneficiaries. So a good example of this is Airbnb. I imagine most of you have used Airbnb in some way. And honestly, their first idea was kind of horrible, which was to rent airbeds at people's houses. For any of you who have used an airbed, it's not a particularly nice experience. But obviously now, it's become one of the kind of leading household brands across the world. Will, I think you had something you wanted to add in there.
Yeah, I was going to say that yeah, I've heard this quote, and I think it's really relevant to have a good idea. You need a lot of good ideas. So, to create all of these different ideas and generation we can talk about later on is important. And to not feel too fixed or stuck with just one.
For sure. And another big theme that we kind of reiterate is to start with a problem, not a solution. So I used to work at King's and run the startup program at King's. And when students and potential founders came in, we would ask them a set of questions, which is not, what is your idea? It is, what problem are you solving? And if they weren't able to articulate that, with based in kind of research, then we would ask them to go out and do that research. Because the next question is, what do you know about that problem? Potentially, what do you know about that problem that other people don't? What are the surprising discoveries you've made about that problem? Because actually people talk about intellectual property, and actually the first and kind of core part of your intellectual property is the time that you've spent out discovering this problem. And part of that is you can research stuff online. There's some value to that, but I call that safe research. The most powerful stuff is from going out, speaking to the people that you are designing for, learning from them, not pitching an idea to them, but saying, what are the challenges you're facing? What do they look like? What can I learn from you? And back to you, Will, you've done this for sure the hard way, and let's say a messy way in many ways. Do you want to kind of share a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. And I think we'll talk about this a bit more later on, but there's as important as what we'll say is like product market fit, there's also founder market fit. So, whether that's your own background and experience and, actually looking back as someone with a civil engineering degree, infrastructure and, contribution to society and working with larger kind of utilities and stuff, that kind of fell into my remit. That was important. That kind of made the idea, the problem unique, well, not unique, but held a special place in my heart. But it was also going out there, making the contacts, trying to use what little experience and knowledge I did have. And I think Stephen Bartlett, one of the dragons on Dragon's Den, he always says, some people at the early stage with their ideas or whatnot, they always seem very scared to talk about it and share it. You shouldn't do that. Your idea and your solution and your problem, that should be unique to you, as in you should be uniquely positioned to be able to take that forward. So you shouldn't be scared. You should have, you've done your research. You should, it should be something that you're well positioned to tackle and move forwards with. So yeah, talk about your ideas with people, get their insights, and yeah, take it from there.
So your first challenge is, the next time we chat, what we would love to be able to ask is, what problem area are you solving and what have you discovered? What have you learned? Who have you spoken to? That is a really positive next step for all of you from today. And related to this is this quote from a professor at Harvard Business School called Theodore Levitt, which is all about basically what you are offering to your users. And he says, people don't want to buy a 1/4-inch drill, they want a 1/4-inch hole. And so what you'll see from this quote is that people buy outcomes and not inputs. So I sometimes used to try and wind people up by saying, I don't care about your AI. I don't care about your blockchain. I don't care about your piece of hardware. I care about what it does. Where does it get me as a user? What benefits does it bring me? And that mindset, I think, can really help fundamentally shift how you go about exploring a problem. What are you doing for them? Not what are you excited about doing kind of for yourself, right? Awesome. Thanks, Will. And just to kind of really reiterate this, one of the great scientists and innovators throughout history, Einstein says if he had an hour to solve a problem, he'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem itself and 5 minutes on solutions. So there we go. That's a pretty authoritative voice. The next notion is to think, well, actually, ideas are not that hard to find. If you were to spend the next few weeks thinking about ideas, how might you go about doing that? Where might you look? What might you focus on? Write in the chat, unmute. So I like Will's prompt, environmental issues in the news. There's plenty of those around. Michelina, I love this. What are the things that bother you personally? There's no better motivator to go and dedicate months or years of your life to a problem because it annoys you, it frustrates you, it keeps you up at night. You see it on the tube on your commute to university, for example, whatever it might be. Air pollution, heat waves, things that you are kind of viscerally, tangibly kind of interacting with or experiencing at a given time. Marco says, chat with people, understand what it is that's causing them stress or problems in their everyday life. For sure. Anyone else? Where might you go and discover these problems? One, make friends with people that share your passions, for sure, because then you start kind of building on your own understanding by sharing with others and learning from others. One area that you might also want to think about, as Will said, is like, who are you and what do you know about, right? You're all studying at university, you have your own lived experience, which might be from education, from work. What do you know about? What insights, what knowledge might you bring to a particular area that others may not have? So the way we like to frame this at a very simple level is, what do you care about or know about or notice? So this has come through already. What keeps you up at night? What are you passionate about? Or what have you spent time researching, learning about, educating yourself about? And then lastly, what do you notice? What do you see in your personal experience of your own challenges or other people's challenges at a given time? Super. There's all sorts of great stuff coming through, food waste and the volume and size of that problem. The next prompt is something that I think is maybe overlooked in some ways, which is that human beings, if we have too much scope and the parameters are too broad, that doesn't actually increase imagination and creativity. It can reduce it because it's scary. So actually, I like to think about what if the constraints can lead to creativity. So rather than, tackling a broad area, you say, actually, I want to dig into this specific area. I really want to, dig into a particular problem. And then within that area, kind of bounce around different ideas to see how we might solve that. Will,
So
I don't know if you had anything to add there.
Yeah, so this definitely proved true when it came to sort of manhole metrics. first and foremost, it was the constraints of the competition, Mayor's Entrepreneur Program. That was I decided I wanted to go the distance with an idea, told myself, right, I'm going to apply. That was the first constraint. But then I also was looking at different categories and where I thought I might be well suited to. I saw smart cities. I saw they were looking for solutions around the environment and sort of technology and ways to make it greener, make it greener, more sustainable, more eco-friendly with tech and data and whatnot. And then it was right, kind of I've had this flooding problem. We need to find a solution to this. So as you can see, started putting in numerous constraints that kind of came out then with an idea that kind of fit these parameters and gave me those good bumper rails to operate within.
Great stuff. Thanks, Will. So we wanted to give you a framework for assessing ideas, which is basically your assumptions. So we began this session saying that good ideas are a set of assumptions or hypotheses that you go out and test. What a great place to start. So what that looks like, and I work for an impact VC, we literally use this framework to help build the ideas of the entrepreneurs that we work with. There are kind of 4 categories to test, 4 categories of hypothesis. Number 1, desirability. This point about your users. Do your users, customers, and beneficiaries really want this or need this? How likely is it that they will use it in the way that you anticipate? Etc. Start with the problem. This is the ongoing theme of today. Then second, feasibility. Can we realistically build this? Do we have the resources, technology, skills, experience to make it happen? Are there regulatory concerns, legal compliance, budgetary? Can we make this happen? Then next, viability. Is there a business opportunity here? Are there enough people with enough money to make this launch and sustain and grow? Then, is the end user the same or different to the customer? In some cases, those who use your product might be different to those who pay. We'll, give you tools to approach all of these different questions as we go along. And then lastly, effectiveness. A lot of you have talked about kind of the importance of inherent impact in your idea. Can you evidence that what your idea does or your solution does it have kind of greater impact and kind of more effective outcomes than what already exists? So hopefully you'll see how these kind of 4 pillars are just a very kind of robust framework of the different prompts or questions that you will need to think about to assess your idea and begin to give you a kind of plan for testing that idea within your teams and also out in your communities. So some other prompts around this. How are your target users solving the problem? How will they use a particular product? How do they hear about the product? How do we bring people in? How do we get them to keep coming back? What's the number 1 piece of value or benefit they would get from this product? How would you make money? There's all sorts of questions here. But really, this is like a kind of starter pack for you to take away. Anastasia just said you need to set off. The recording and the slides will all be shared with you on the Mighty Networks platform. And I think as a follow-up email from the team at the Mayor's Entrepreneur Program too. So in a moment, we want you to start thinking about a particular problem area and some of your assumptions around it. But we are so lucky to have Will in the team this year, because Will has been there and done that on this program. So Will was actually going to share what this kind of assumption process looked like for him in building manhole metrics. Over to you, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. So as kind of I took you through a little bit the journey, it was around, the problem kind of pivoted from, well, fat bugs are the problem to really the underlying issue, which was flooding. And from speaking to various stakeholders, from water utilities and whatnot, we were finding that there were three kind of underlying key drivers, and that these drivers were going to make the flooding issue worse. Trying to understand what their current status quo was. Well, the networks are so big, and they don't have good enough sensors or cheap enough sensors that they can deploy across the networks. They're ending up responding in a very cost and effective way that is reactive. That was the problem that we boiled it down to. And then it was trying to think about, well, what features do our product need in order to address this problem, this gap in the market. And then we kind of refined over and over, from speaking to, must have been, 20, 30 different people, whatnot, to these low cost, long life and easy to install sensors with this software that allows you to monitor the data and get the insights. So we tested across those kind of 4 categories that Ed was talking about. Might not have been consciously, in fact, I can say it definitely wasn't consciously right desirability, feasibility, viability, and effectiveness at the time. But looking back, that is ultimately what we were doing. We're seeing, right, they've got this need, they're willing to spend money on it. Is it actually doable to build the solution that they are actually after? Could we get grant funding or investment for this? And ultimately, is the solution going to be fixing the problem that we set out to solve? So yeah, that's, I hope, gives a little bit more context as to our journey and kind of the assumptions you might want to make.
Awesome. Thank you, Will. So now it's time to hand things over to you guys. So we're going to run an exercise which is about identifying your assumptions. So so number one, to kind of choose a problem area, and think about a potential solution to that problem. And then pen, paper on your devices, Post-its, however you work best, to start thinking about some of the assumptions that you need to test. So what we're going to do is go back to this screen here with the 4 different assumption categories. And we're going to spend about 5 minutes with each of you kind of making notes in these different categories. And along the way, we are here to help. So if you want to unmute and jump in with a question or write in the chat, it might be, I don't yet have a problem area and we can give you some examples to solve. It might be, I want some feedback on my potential ideas so I can pick one to do this exercise. Whatever it is that you need help on, that's why we're here. But we're going to run this for 5 minutes, and I'm going to put it on the clock. Constraints equals more creativity. Time constraints equals more creativity. So over to you guys, 5 minutes starting now. Some really interesting comments coming through. Emma is making an assumption here, which is air quality on the underground, but we don't think the TfL would care much to improve it. I can't say whether that's true. Certainly hope it's not. But something to go and test. Who can you speak to at TfL who's involved with transport and the underground network to dig deeper into that? Oh, Will, you've got direct knowledge of this. Do you want to unmute and share more?
Sure, yeah. So I was fortunate enough to work on the Crossrail project, and they put in these well, for those who's travelled on the Elizabeth line, they put in these doors from platform to a ceiling, like they have on, I think, is it Jubilee line in many places. It's both a safety perspective to stop people, getting onto the track during periods of congestion, but it was also to separate the track, the tunnel air from the station air, because they're aware of the poor quality of the air. What is it? Something like traveling on the tube on your commute each week is like smoking a pack of cigarettes or something like that. I have heard that somewhere. But
So there's a comment here about food waste, the tourism hub. There's potentially some assumptions within that there's a huge amount of food waste created by tourists, that tourists let's say in a short time in London are motivated enough to keep food waste to a minimum or keep packaging waste to a minimum. It's all sorts of questions this is prompting in my mind. Connecting with food banks and charities, what are the pain points they might be facing? What problems do they need solving? What support, partnerships, resources, funding might they have available or not? What specific part of the food waste challenge might you be targeting? Is it the suppliers, the manufacturers, the retailers, the consumers who buy the food, the policymakers? Again, this thing of like putting constraints on the problem. How can you kind of focus in on certain parts of a particular problem? Likewise, air quality on the underground. Are you focusing on, let's say, like supply or demand, or upstream or downstream, however you frame it, like the creators of the pollution or those who are impacted by it? Is it about prevention? Is it about protection? Is it about face masks? Is it which part of the problem are you looking at? Filippo, plastic waste, thousands of water fountains, and everyone just needs a water bottle and an easy way to find those fountains. Yeah, instead of always buying a new plastic bottle. This is one that pains me, especially in airports. We have to chuck away our water at security and then forced to pay £2 or £3 for a new water bottle at WH Smith's the other side. What is it that's creating that challenge? Is it the people who are drinking the water, buying the water bottles? Is it the infrastructure, access to the fountains? Is it about the information about the infrastructure, mapping out where they might be? Who can you speak to? Where can you go out onto the street, into organizations to discover that problem more? I think that's there's so much richness there to dig into. So about the food waste issue, focusing on hospitality and retail and supermarkets, then households in London, and then potentially across the world. So I would say, are you looking to address the supermarkets, or the people serving the food, which is hospitality, or the people buying the food. So there's 3 different categories there. You may not know the answer yet, but that's like a question or assumption to go out and discover. Alina says, tackling the problem of energy consumption in gyms, which could be reused kinetic energy from Oxford Street. Love that. So creating kinetic treadmills to reduce energy bills. You know, who are you speaking to? They're the creators of infrastructure and roadways. Is it the owners of gyms, the people who work in procurement, who bring in the equipment into gyms? Which part of that whole kind of chain of impact are you going to focus on? And just the more precise you are about the particular kind of parts of that chain you want to focus on, the more rich the information you might get back.
Interesting. Yeah. What are those constraints? Is it space? You know, what are, so, you know, how much are their bills? How much are they looking to decrease it? What are the drivers behind this? You know, could it just be whilst energy prices are high that this is a good solution, you know, or even a problem that's out there? You know, what we're trying to narrow down, if it is gyms, then what is specifically desirable, feasible, viable, and effective about kind of this problem and idea that you're proposing, which is really great, really great.
A great question to start with, and actually when I'm building out new propositions, I like to begin with this one, is to say to your users, beneficiaries, paying customers, partners, if you had a ranking scale of 1 to 100, how big a pain point is this? How much energy, stress, money, inefficiency does this cost you? How much does it keep you up at night? And I start thinking, if it's like 80 out of 100 upwards, you're like, they really care. If it's 90 or upwards, you're like, this is a big deal. If it's under 80, in my kind of impression, you kind of think, well, maybe they don't care enough to buy new stuff, to change behaviors, to work with new suppliers. It's such a valuable framework to be able to quantify the kind of scale of a problem in the minds of your users. So that's a kind of prompt for each of you to think about. Michalina shared a really interesting one, which is about kind of community space. I actually worked with some architects on a project relating to this in Sheffield this summer. So I kind of have seen some elements of this firsthand. Seating space is about creating comfortable cities. It's also about creating community and addressing loneliness and isolation and creating social cohesion. So when you say this is not necessarily a business idea, actually, you know, this is a real problem. This is about, you know, like social engineering, architectural design, city planning, etc. So I think there's a huge amount to dig into there. And, you know, you can speak to the people directly out on the street. You can speak to communities and think about what they feel like they're lacking about rest, about community, about creating community spaces. So
really interesting. And the first thought I had when I was reading this is, oh, you know, toilets for London. That was one of the previous Mayor's Entrepreneur winners. You know, there's lack of toilets in London. Well, via the app, you could see where they are, and you pay like 20p or whatnot to be able to use it. Is there something maybe there in this? But you know, it's all about, well, how's it going to make money? How many people are finding this or wanting this? You know, how hard would it be to build an app and maybe map these spaces? You know, all that good stuff. But these are really great ideas you guys are putting up. I really like it.
Okay, and then lastly, Natalia, making more sustainable environments we live in, creating objects, everyday objects in a more sustainable way. We drown in products. Definitely agree with that end up in landfill. Um, so material sourcing. How might you go about thinking about this product? This problem. So again, one way to think, I mean, this is language that might be new or not, but like the value chain. So every problem is part of a system, and often that system can be interrelated, but also quite complex. So let's say we buy cheap furniture and it goes into landfill. So there is a material part of that, which is what materials are used. There's a manufacture part, which is the processes and techniques and the wastage around the manufacturing. There's a distribution and logistics component. You know, how many miles does that piece of furniture travel to get to our homes? There's a consumption issue, which is, do we use it for 6 months or 6 years or 60 years? Each of those are very different. And then there's an end of life part, which is, does someone else buy it? Do we get extension in its lifetime? Does it go to a landfill site? Does it go to a recycle site? Who's involved with that? Like, if it can, I find visually mapping out that what's called the value chain can help you think about, actually, I think this is where problem might be, or this is where I think I can add most value. So Natalia, hopefully that helps kind of begin to frame that broader kind of problem area.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
I would say there's maybe a little bit of an assumption in there around that people aren't aware of this when they're buying, and that is kind of what you're maybe thinking about, Natalia. So my challenge for you would be to go out, speak to a few different people when they're buying things. Are they thinking about, you know, the energy, how long they're going to use it for, how they're going to potentially, just dispose of the product or sell it on at the end of its life? You know, that the to go out and challenge that assumption and see if it holds.
Loving all of your ideas and input so far. We're now at 11:05. I think it's a good time for a little comfort break. If you want to like mute, turn off your cameras, go and grab a tea or coffee, and we'll see you back here for part 2 at 11:10. Thank you. Okay, hey everyone, welcome back. It'd be great as you're coming back into the session to add a reaction to the message I'm going to write in the chat now with a thumbs up to show who's back. Okay, cool. Good to see you guys coming back from your break. We would love to hear from one of you some of the assumptions you've been developing. So if you'd like on Zoom to put your hand up and share some of your assumptions, what better opportunity to get feedback from me and Will to help take your idea forward. Diana, yes, shout out for the first volunteer. Do you want to unmute and share?
Yeah, hi. My idea is about waste, food waste resulted from restaurant in London. And my solution is about chemicals that can convert the food waste into compost.
Could you just broke up while you shared your solution? Could you share that again?
The problem is food waste generated from restaurant in London. And my solution is about chemicals that can convert the food waste into compost.
Okay, fantastic. And what are the assumptions that you need to test to develop your solution?
Should I say that desirability and feasibility and viability?
Exactly, or kind of broader assumptions that you need to test.
Yeah. So customers, which are the restaurant, pay money for the government to remove the waste. So they can convert their waste into new valuable products, so they can get money. So they get rid of the waste that they are generated, and they can convert the waste into money by selling the compost to another company. That's it. So
can I kind of share some comments here?
yes, please.
Yeah. So it sounds like a really interesting solution and potentially some really exciting science and technology behind this. I think some of the things, well, first of all, there are two groups you mentioned that you should begin speaking to. One is the people like selling the food, retailers. The other are the, let's say, governmental, local government and services who deal with the food waste.
Yes.
Loads of questions asked both of them. How does it work now? What are the challenges? What does it cost you? What do you wish could be different? If we introduced a new way of doing this, what's the impact on you? What would it cost you? Would you have to retrain your staff, change your systems, have new machinery? Are there regulatory constraints about bringing in a new product to the market, that might be chemical otherwise? If so, what are the regulatory processes to introduce that to the market? What budget would you have available? But I could go on, right? Like this process is like, what are the questions that I don't yet know the answer to, that I need the answer to for this to be successful? Does that make sense?
Yes, sure. Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. So your homework is to go and find lists of names of people to go and speak to in those two categories of users. So retailers and kind of local government and recycling and waste management services.
So
Awesome.
from the government, should I communicate with who?
Sorry?
For the government part, could you give me some examples that I can communicate with? So I have a contact with the retailer, but about the government,
Well,
Yeah.
it might be someone like Biffa, Veolia. These are people who might currently collect the waste. LinkedIn is always a great place to start. But so many different food places, particularly in London. You could go to Soho and just spend, maybe a weekday during the afternoon when they're not very busy, going shop to shop, asking them outright, what do you currently do with your food waste? How do you process it? How much is it costing you? Maybe they can put you in touch with their current waste collectors and whatnot. But yeah, I would say Biffa, Veolia, those are great places to begin. And LinkedIn.
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Will's the guy. For insights on this. Marco, your hand is up. Do you want to jump in?
Yeah, can do. Hello. Thank you for the for the session. It was very useful. And I have a couple of ideas which are kind of similar. So I gonna, in a way, it's not really group them together, but they are both related to employments in a way. So the one of them is really was mostly about something that I feel also personal because I'm doing a course as a master degree as well, which is kind of is kind of difficult to find a work because there are very limited spaces, which is game software engineering. And when you do find some opening, they are always kind of very high demands for starting the journey. Could be you already have to have some experience working on specific platform or technology, and that's the problem that is very personal, and I'm thinking about a possible solution that I was thinking is to have a platform where students or people that just graduated in similar situations that struggles about it can potentially find each other and start to create some little programs or projects that they can showcase then to the companies that in a way could be also used as a projects that are not similar to like university projects, something that can be more impactful or released. My only problem is that what I was thinking that it could be one of the problems and effectiveness of the problem of the idea is, or would you stop if it's something that doesn't doesn't pay the labor for the people, is something that is more for the experience of, do you stop companies to utilize the platform? So that's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, for sure. And well done for identifying that. Another way to think about entrepreneurship is behavior change. So every time we introduce something new into people's lives, there is an impact. I need to train myself on it. I need to pay for it. I need to influence people in my organization to use it. It's like, that can be complicated. But of course, that's our challenge as entrepreneurs. So will they use it? Is it valuable? Will they pay for it? Will it meet the goals and benefit, out kind of strategies and requirements of that organization? So again, like Diana, you have two different groups to begin exploring with: students and organizations, and putting together a list of questions. What do I need to know that I don't yet know?
Yeah.
And I would say not to pitch the idea immediately, but to begin with the problem. Like, what are your challenges as an organization? How are you looking to engage more with young people? Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And yes, no, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, but actually it makes a lot of sense. I think the first things I need to probably solve is also of or would I generate income in a way from the idea, and could it be something that maybe companies might partnership and do something that is similar to an internship program, but it's more related to financiate the people that are doing the project without really doing it directly.
Yes. There's
What
so
I think,
much here to dig into.
what I think is really great though is that you're already kind of challenging yourself and your own idea on some of these different points, which is fantastic. And you're thinking about how could it make money, and you're putting different ideas out there, like, you know, maybe recruiters could advertise, or, you know, could there be links to different companies, which is really great. And I think ultimately, as you're saying, it's to really try and in your own mind convince yourself that your idea is desirable, feasible, viable, and effective. So I think, yeah, you know, you've got a lot of the right things already going on in your mind. So that's really brilliant. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone. We would love to pick out a third example, but I think we need to move on in the interest of time. Because now we're going to move into the kind of like idea generation part. So jumping ahead, we wanted to introduce this concept of basically what's called convergent and divergent thinking methods. If you've come across this methodology, write in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. It's also a core part of methodologies like design thinking, which is basically iterative approaches to having an idea, testing the idea, coming up with solutions, testing those solutions, and iterating. And this is like a kind of foundational process in building startups. So divergent thinking is like, okay, we start with the nub of a problem. We think that the problem of high levels of pollution on London Underground is a significant one that needs challenging. So then the divergent thinking is, okay, what do we not know about? What are the assumptions? What are the questions that we need to answer to discover this better? And it's like throwing things against the wall, not knowing the answer to it. Big ideas, high volume ideas, wacky, no idea or no assumption or no question is bad, just like high volume of stuff. And then what the convergent part of this does is using the kind of analytical part of our human minds to think, to question that, to challenge what's happening here, how might this work, how might it not work, what are the, you know, how do we refine some of our ideas to improve them. A question for you guys, of these two, let's say, creative thinking methods, what kind of people do you think are very good at divergent thinking? Big imaginative ideas, high volume of ideas, not critiquing those ideas. Who's good at that? Designers and architects. I like it. Who else? Artists from Will. And writers, who might be less good at divergent thinking? Engineers. Who else? So in a moment, we're going to do an activity which is about basically creating a high volume of ideas. And I've been running these sessions for a really long time, probably about 10 years now. And I've seen some interesting stuff, which is basically, if you ask the question of like, create, you know, come up with ideas against a particular question, the people who are really crap at this are like lawyers who are very analytical and figuring out how to refine things and be precise, but open-ended, open thinking, less good. Also business leaders, CEOs, whose job it is to mitigate risk, look at dashboards, assess business performance, but like, you know, figure out how and why not the business might be successful. And the people who are amazing at this are kids, because they haven't done that process of growing up into an adult where we become very good at that important process of scrutinizing information, being rational, and potentially closing down that creative thinking method. And it's the interplay between this opening up of ideas and non-critiquing, and then the scrutiny and assessment and refining of those ideas, like the opening and the closing, which helps ideas iterate. And so we're going to try that out now. Nabil says, do you think there are some people who are both convergent and divergent thinkers? I think for sure. And it's also a mindset that I believe can be taught and can be practiced. And that's what we're going to do now. So divergent thinking, creating fast, developing positively, and then critiquing later. And so in a moment, we're going to practice this. We've talked about how constraints can increase creativity. So we're going to give you 60 seconds on the clock. So get your pens or your notepads or your keyboards or your iPhones ready. We're going to spend 60 seconds writing as many problems you care about, know about, or notice that you might want to solve in the kind of broader area that you've been considering today. 60 seconds, starting 3, 2, 1, now. And 30 seconds left. Ten seconds left. And that is time up. Okay. We'd love to see in the chat how many different problems you wrote down in those 60 seconds. So just put one single number in the chat. Let's see how you guys got on. 6 from Charlotte. Good going. 4 from Marco, Emma. Nurultania, 8. Will got 5. Getting stuck in. Natalia, 10.
1 every 6 seconds. That's impressive.
That is good going. Okay, good stuff, guys. Often we run this activity and people are like, I had 1 or 2. Okay, this is fascinating. If you're happy, Natalia, with the 10 ideas, it would be awesome if you unmuted and shared like some of the techniques that helped you kind of expand the volume of the problems that you wrote down.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe hi. So maybe I kind of went a little bit like too detailed because I could have closed them in more in like bigger categories. But I started with like the major problem, and I just started to look what it causes this, which are often the problems in themselves as well. So like I started with like waste streams, and then it was overproduction, then overconsumption. Then it was like the materials, so like plastics, concrete, so they could be kind of together. And then it was like the production method, so the way of production not sustainably, and then the energy use. So it's sort of kind of like, you know, it's like a thought of threads of thought that kind of ended up being quite a few. And then, you know, with the overconsumption, it was rubbish landfills, then the construction industry. So it's kind of like yeah, like a brainstorming that we're kind of, I think that we're all kind of linked with each other. That's why it ended up being quite a lot.
I love this. And what I sense here is like you started in one place, which kind of was a domino effect onto the next one. It was almost like not quite, well, like problem association or word association.
Yeah.
So
Bit of a domino.
yeah. And like the opposite of that I see sometimes is when it's one person, let's say, is like obsessed with what they think the problem is, and they want to like stay on that problem because they're so sure that that's the problem. But actually, as we've seen some of the problem areas we've been looking at today, it's like, okay, so there's the people who sell, who produce, who distribute, who buy, who recycle, who get rid of, who create new products at the end of it. Like this is a complex space that we're looking at, right? Environment, sustainability, and there's so many areas that we can impact. So like getting that whole map out through this exercise is just an amazing place to start.
I think what's so great is also, you know, a lot of people mentioned in the chat that didn't come in with an idea or whatnot, and that you've got to create that space for creativity and think about what matters to you. And in 60 seconds, most people have come up with 4 or 5 different problems, and I'm sure there are half a dozen different solutions that you could come up with to try and tackle maybe even just a part of that problem. So, you know, get out of one's own head that you need a huge amount of time to find a problem and potentially a solution to that right here, right now, in the space of just a few minutes, you've been able to do that. So big pat on the back.
For sure. And Neural Tandier, have I pronounced your name right? I think you had 8 different problems. I don't know, would you like to unmute and share maybe some of the tactics you use to get such a high volume out in a short time? Oh, let's see if I can unmute you. Bear with me. Oh, it says you are unmuted, but maybe you could write some notes in the chat. And if anyone else would want to share kind of their approach to this activity. Okay, if you need to reopen the app, yeah, don't worry, but maybe you can write in the chat. But if anyone else would like to share kind of reflections on how they went about that activity and what helped. So big thing here is like not critiquing your idea, oh, that already exists and that won't work and I don't know enough about that area. It's like
remove the self-filter. And I don't know, for me, Ed, I was just trying to think about, you know, what are the things that have bothered me in the past, you know, week or couple of days that, you know, could potentially be solved. Yeah, I don't know for you, Ed, what you kind of thought.
Yeah. Michalina adds to that and says the snowball effect here, I think, like really helps on this. So yes, and is one technique that some of you might have used, which is we basically pair up with someone and you say, okay, the first problem is I think people buy too much takeaway food, which has high volumes of plastic in the wrap, in the packaging. And then the other person can say, yes, and we, you know, and the people who are producing food are using unsustainable materials. Yes, and the policy environment means it's too easy to produce food with plastic. Yes, and there's tons of solutions out there that use new types of material to create more compostable packaging. Yes, and why is it that people aren't, cooking food at home, which reduces the need for packaging in itself? Yes, and so the snowball effect, building on what already exists, rather than saying no, that doesn't work, or no, I don't like that, or whatever, really helps open things up. Emma says things you've already thought about before, things have come up in your degree from the news. Love it. Okay, so we are into like the last 20 minutes or so. We're going to move on. Question for the group: who here has begun using generative AI, and I'm thinking in particular ChatGPT, in any part of your life? I'm interested in this one.
I definitely use it more than I'm willing to openly admit.
I think there's like guilt around this. Alina says yes. Natalia, Michalina, Emma, yeah. It's a safe space, everyone. We can confess. I used it yesterday to draft a press release. I'm gonna admit it. I did edit and improve the press release, but I had 10 minutes to write a press release, so it was pretty helpful. Okay, so Will and I were talking about this, and LLMs and generative AI are like a fact of life, and they are hugely powerful tools. Back in April, I actually used generative AI to build, validate, launch a new product around child behavioral psychology in like 5 weeks, and it was intense as anything, but it was possible because of generative AI. And my Ed's philosophy on how to use generative AI in startups environments is actually going back to this framework for divergent thinking, creating ideas. It's amazing, but it's not very good at like the convergent part, which is the rigor, the science, the user-based research to actually scrutinize, analyze, and evolve ideas. So that is my philosophy about how to use generative AI. And we wanted to introduce basically the idea of prompt engineering. So this is a very new school of actually work and job titles. And I've heard of people being paid like crazy money in Silicon Valley and beyond as prompt engineers, which is basically how do you ask good questions of ChatGPT. So we have put up on screen like an example of how you might do some prompt engineering for idea generation. So this runs a bit like this. Act as a successful startup entrepreneur. So you are like framing that ChatGPT needs to act in a particular way. You've built multi-million businesses in the past. Your new venture is to create a new business in healthcare, or actually in this for this activity, let's imagine environment. So make it creative, easy, low cost to start, and focus it on improving for this activity, environment or sustainability of the city and those living in London. Target this specific problem for this specific audience, etc. There's a funny typo here. But I'm going to stop sharing. And I'm going to invite all of you to actually open up ChatGPT itself. If you don't yet have ChatGPT, then you can create an account. But we thought this was like a really good time to actually practice doing some prompt engineering. So I've written the prompt in the chat. I've also put in square brackets places for you to input your problem and the audience that you're designing for. You can use this prompt directly if you want to save time. You can edit it. I'm sure there's ways that you can improve this prompt. But what this prompt does is help you basically come up with tons of different problem areas and start structuring it in a way that lets you take it forward, including, importantly, the list of assumptions that need to be tested. So we're going to give you guys like the next 3 minutes on the clock to get into ChatGPT. I'll send the link around for those of you who have not used it before. There's the link in the chat. You can get set up with an account. It should be free. And then when you've got some results from GPT, we can share them as a group. Thirty seconds left. Ten seconds. Okay, and stop there. Who would like to jump in and share what the crazy, wonderful world of ChatGPT has produced for them?
I had a really interesting one to kick things off. What ChatGPT came up with for me was to run a service business that installs and maintains green roofs and walls on residential and commercial buildings. that would help improve air quality, be aesthetic, and kind of reduce the urban heat island effect, which I thought was really interesting. Could be a good starting point to develop it out. Maybe it's not just the service and maintenance, maybe it's actually around the consulting and maybe providing an app where you could actually put in your square footage, your location, you could see how much it might cost and the benefits. Interesting starting point, right?
Nice. Yeah, I love that. Who would like to jump in next?
Hi, sorry, I had a microphone problem earlier. So I tried to use this prompt on ChatGPT, and the answer just made me laugh out loud because it's basically exactly what I have been trying to do, which I've never used on ChatGPT before. So it's telling me to produce this app that's targeting professional and working household in and around London about, you know, reducing food waste and food consumption. And the things that they're telling me to, you know, what kind of thing do you feature for this business is intelligent meal planners, shopping list, recipe suggestions. This is all like the common theme in like this is a common food app. You know, you've seen these apps before. And one of the things that it says here is also adding a community hub, which to me is kind of like what I'm trying to do as well with my business idea. But I wanted to expand it further into like trying to gamify it in the sense that you know, we, like, for example, in your postcode, you're the top person who, you know, save a lot of money on your food waste because you have been, you know, saving a lot of your food. You didn't throw away your leftovers or stuff like that. So yeah, that was it's a good thing. This is a good exercise as well.
That's, your brain is like fully in sync with ChatGPT.
Yeah. Collective intelligence right there.
Love it. That's hilarious. And so tell us what you think some of the assumptions that are inherent in this that you might need to test.
I think it's definitely whether people would like to, I mean, it's obviously people do they need to be reminded all the time that they have food left in their fridge, for example, that they still haven't you know, like for example, if I have a few bits of apples and then, you know, my app will say, oh, by the way, you still have 4 apples left in your fridge, you're gonna do something about it. Or, and you know, if you're busy working and you don't have time to cook or anything, it's kind of like trying to cater to that kind of busy lifestyle, right? So instead of, if you can't do anything with it, then maybe you can share it with your community. That's kind of like the whole point as well. Like, it's in, I wouldn't say it's a super app, but maybe something along that line as well. Like, you can do a lot of things with it, not just creating an inventory of what you're buying or what you have in your fridge, and then trying to constantly remind the, you know, the users whether they are using their food to the best of its sustainable ability, you know, like I'm just trying to like trying to expand it in a way that goes beyond just a normal inventory stuff, if that makes sense. Yeah. And the community hub isn't just for me about you being the top person in your area to have saved a lot of money and a lot of energy as well, because of the, you know, like if you put your food too long in rotting in the fridge too long, it might also affect the fridge, so that might incur a lot more energy, like electricity usage. So like, it's not just about saving money and letting people be aware of how much they might save money and energy from this, but it's also like, I mean, the community hub in my plan in my head is like maybe have a weekly cookout in the area where people can share their food, meet other people, save money, and maybe even if they have homegrown foods, homegrown carrots or something like that, then they can share around. It's like, yeah, that's the idea in my head right now. It's
very cool. It's very cool. And thank you for sharing. So I'm gonna share some thoughts on this that I think are really important in this stage. So you have tons of feature ideas for your idea, for your product. At this stage, I would really encourage you to step back from the solution. And what I mean is, I would say if you spoke to 10 people and said, you know, do you think food waste is a problem? Most of those people would say yes. So we know that the problem is there. The complexity is really great because it's like, why is it still a problem if everyone knows about it? So right now, your homework is go and speak to people, go and speak to 10, 20, 30 people and say, what is your experience of food waste? Why does it happen? What's going on? At what point does it happen? When you buy it, when you store it in the fridge, when you go to dispose it, and what would make you change? Like money, saving energy, saving food, environmental impact, getting nudges around gamification, connecting more with your community, making it competitive. That is like a set of questions, which is very different to saying, would you use a community platform? Because that is like forcing them more into a particular answer from which you learn less. In a moment, I'm going to share this incredible book called The Mum Test, and I would ask actually all of you to read it because it gets you to really think about how behavioral and user research works. So I love the direction you're going in. I would say,
Okay, thank you so much for that feedback.
yeah. No problem. So yeah, in a moment, I'm going to dig out this book and I'll share a PDF so you don't need to go and buy it. Create more paper waste. So we're into the last few minutes of this session. So we're going to press on. So the next stage here is about how you kind of like codify or summarize the area that you're looking to solve for. And this is called a problem statement. There is a statement of need, and yet it is not currently being solved. So in the example we just talked about, food waste is a massive problem that everyone is aware of. But yet, we see that 30% of food is being thrown away, and people are not aware of the tools to save money and food at the same time. For example, I'm kind of making it up as I go along. So short, punchy sentences describing the challenge of your startup addresses. Kids want better education, yet X% of kids are unable to receive quality education in primary school because of a shortage of whatever. And the last bullet point is the key one. Your idea is irrelevant at this point. You're framing the problem and what you learn from people, not the solution, because that is jumping ahead. You want to become experts in this problem you're solving first. So to think about convergent thinking, like, you know, kind of beginning to rationalize this problem space that you've chosen and evaluate your ideas. The first, like, how big is this opportunity or how big is this pain point? So I talked about this sliding scale of asking people to rate a problem 1 to 100. You might also think about rating the size of the market from 1 to 100. That helps understand how big a problem this is. And I wanted to share a case study from my own life that was very painful in this respect. My last 2 startups, one was called FireTech, the other was called Futureproof. The first FireTech, and they sold the same thing, which was tech education. FireTech to under 18s, Futureproof to like graduates and career changers. And FireTech sold online and in-person coding and AI and robotics courses to parents. Futureproof sold trained software engineers to employers. At FireTech, we had 10% market share, woohoo! But the market was tiny. Across the UK, parents only spent like 25 or 30 million per year. So 10% of a small pie, not good. We went bust and were brought out of distress. Futureproof, the total market was 1,000 times bigger because every big employer under the sun is trying to hire high quality software engineers. And so Futureproof had like massive, massive potential. So are you operating in the right market? Are you a good fit So Will mentioned before this idea of founder market fit. You're looking to solve a particular problem. Like, do you have one or more of like the passion, the knowledge of your users, the academic or science or research basis to make this happen, the skills, the expertise, the experience? That is founder market fit, and it helps you assess whether you're like in the right, let's say, problem area. I'm going to move on. I would call on you, Will, but we're running out of time. Are you sure about the problem? You think there is a big problem, but like, are you sure of how it works? Have you spent that time thinking about it? By the way, in the chat, people are sharing their LinkedIns, which is great. Let's all connect and collaborate together. Are you ready to commit? Startups is a big commitment. You know, will you take 6 months of your life, a year, 5 years to make this happen? Do you care enough about it? Are there underlying trends in this space, policy, technology, investment? And is it a hard problem? Sometimes people focus on the easy stuff or the shiny stuff, but sometimes the harder things are a good place to start. And Will, with Manhole Metrics, is a good example of that. Will like put on his high-vis jacket and really got stuck into the undiscovered and sometimes, you know, grimy world of like sewage and waste disposal across London, and is now building something incredibly valuable for the city. Are there competitors? Sometimes having a competitor, actually almost always, proves that there's market demand. So do not be put off if they're competitors. Just think about how to be different or better.
How many different coffee shops do you know? You know, there's Costa, there's Pratt, Starbucks, Blank Street. It all shows that there's demand. It's not necessarily a bad thing.
We can talk more about that in upcoming sessions. So the last thing is about connecting with us. So here's a QR code. If you haven't connected on LinkedIn, feel free to scan that code now while it's on screen. I'm here to help and answer any questions you might have. And then lastly, Mighty Networks. This is a community. There's already like 500 students and founders on there. Join the community, learn from people, collaborate, network. And so now we are almost at the end of the session. It's your chance to jump in with any questions you might have. Is anything unclear from today? Is there anything you'd like more information on?
I've got one for you, Ed. What if, you know, if I was attending, what would you want me to go away and do between now and the next session, the next workshop?
Well, thank you, Will. You've teed me up perfectly. So to close, some key takeaways from today. So first of all, to think about where problems come from. What do you know about? What do you care about? And what do you notice? That is a great place to start. Second, to think about volume. How can you create like as big and uncritiqued a list of potential problem areas as possible? And then next step, like what are the assumptions around that you need to go out and test? And really at this stage, imagine you know nothing. We all have lived experience and knowledge of stuff, but imagine you know nothing. What can you go out and discover with an open mind from the people that might pay for your product, be impacted by your product, use your product, and imagine you know nothing. That like child mentality is an amazing one to have at this stage. So, and if you are able to, the next step beyond that is to start drawing up a list of people that you know or in your network or you might be able to contact and to go and start talking to them. And I'm going to stop sharing because on the fly, I'm going to see if I can pull out the mum test. Where are we? I'm going to actually put this up on Mighty Networks as an incentive for you guys to join up with the community. So if you scan that link there, you'll be able to join in with Mighty Networks, and right away I'm going to post that PDF to the book. You can get some really kind of pro expert insights on how to do research around your new problem areas you're going to be working on. Okay, we're going to end there. Thank you so much, everyone, for being part of today's session. I think it's been super valuable to get all of your ideas and contributions. Thanks so much, Will, for being part of it too. And we'll see you at the next workshop. Have a great rest of the week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. You too. Have a great day.
Hey, Will, should we just stay on for a minute, just waiting for Thomas and Xiaofeng?
Oh, I think the recording is still going.
Mm-hmm.